she begged. "Please, don't look at me." The rancher looked and froze. The barn door creaked open at midnight. Jake Henderson gripped his rifle tighter as he stepped inside, boots crunching on hay. Something had been killing his cattle for 3 nights straight, and tonight he would end it. A whimper came from the far corner. Jake's finger moved to the trigger. The sound was human, fragile, afraid. He raised his lantern higher and saw a figure huddled behind a pile of feed sacks. "Come out," he commanded. His voice echoed in the darkness. "Please don't," a woman's voice whispered. "Please just go away." Jake moved closer. The lantern light spread across the wooden floor, reaching toward the shadows where she hid. "I said come out. This is my property. I'm begging you," she said, her words breaking. "Don't look at me. Just leave and forget you saw anything." But Jake Henderson was not a man who walked away from mysteries on his own land. He stepped forward, raising the lantern until the light fell fully on her hiding place. He froze. The woman crouched there was covered in blood. It soaked her torn dress, matted her dark hair, and stained her hands. But that was not what stopped Jake's heart. Her face was a mass of fresh wounds, deep cuts that looked like claw marks running from her forehead down to her chin. One eye was swollen shut. The other stared at him with pure terror. "Please," she whispered again. Jake lowered his rifle slowly. "What happened to you?" "You need to leave. Right now. Before he comes back." "Before who comes back?" She shook her head frantically. "He'll kill you." "He kills everyone who sees me." Jake knelt down, setting the lantern beside him. "I'm not leaving you like this." "You need a doctor." "There's no time for doctors," she said. "There's barely time for breathing." As if summoned by her words, a sound came from outside. Heavy footsteps crunching on gravel. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. The woman's good eye went wide. "Hide," she hissed. "For God's sake, hide." But Jake stood instead, picking up his rifle. "This is my ranch. Nobody comes here and hurts people." "You don't understand," she said, tears mixing with blood on her face. "He's not a person." The barn door exploded inward. The thing that entered was 7 feet tall, with shoulders too wide for any normal man. Its face was hidden behind a leather mask stitched together from different colored patches. In its right hand it carried a machete that gleamed wet in the lantern light. Jake fired. The bullet hit the thing square in the chest. It stumbled back 1 step, looked down at the wound, then looked up at Jake. It laughed. The sound was not human. Jake fired again, and again. Each bullet found its mark, but the thing kept coming. It moved faster than anything that size should move, crossing the barn in 3 massive strides. Jake dove sideways as the machete came down, burying itself in the spot where he had stood. He rolled, came up running, and grabbed a pitchfork from the wall. "Run!" he shouted to the woman. But she did not run. She stood instead, something changing in her expression. The fear was still there, but something else had joined it, something harder. "You shouldn't have come back, Carl," she said to the monster. The thing stopped. It turned its masked head toward her. "You shouldn't have kept me alive," she continued, her voice growing stronger despite her wounds. That was your mistake." She reached down and picked up Jake's fallen lantern. For a moment, Jake thought she would throw it at the creature, but instead she threw it at the hay bales stacked against the wall. The barn erupted in flames. Fire spread faster than Jake thought possible. Within seconds, flames climbed the wooden walls and raced across the ceiling beams. The heat hit him like a physical force, and smoke began filling his lungs. The masked figure called Carl turned toward the woman, machete raised. She stood her ground, blood-covered and broken, but no longer cowering. Jake could see it in her stance now, something he had missed before. This was not just a victim. This was someone who had been waiting for this moment. Jake rushed forward with the pitchfork, driving it into Carl's back. The prongs sank deep between the shoulder blades. Carl spun around with impossible speed, backhanding Jake across the barn. Jake hit the wall hard, stars exploding in his vision. "Lucy." Carl's voice came out distorted behind the mask, thick and wet. "You always were ungrateful." Lucy laughed, a sound more terrifying than Carl's inhuman chuckle. "Ungrateful? You killed my husband. You killed my children. You kept me locked in your basement for 2 years while you hunted and murdered anyone who came looking for me." She moved sideways, circling away from the spreading flames, but keeping Carl's attention on her. Jake realized what she was doing. She was giving him time to recover, time to find another weapon. "I gave you a purpose," Carl said, moving toward her. "I gave you life. You gave me hell." Lucy spat back. "But hell taught me how to hate, and hate taught me how to wait." Jake pulled himself up, coughing. His ribs screamed in protest, probably cracked from the impact. Through the smoke, he saw his rifle lying near the burning hay. The ammunition would start cooking off any moment. He needed to get Lucy and himself out before that happened. But Lucy was not done. 3 nights ago, I picked the lock on your basement door, she said. Took me 18 months to file down that spoon handle into something thin enough you never noticed. You were too busy being a monster to pay attention. Carl lunged at her. She dodged left, surprisingly fast for someone so injured, Carl's machete embedded in a support beam. While he struggled to pull it free, Lucy grabbed a shovel from the wall and swung it with both hands into the side of his knee. There was a wet crack. Carl went down on one leg, but did not cry out. He just pulled the machete free and slashed at Lucy. The blade caught her across the shoulder, spinning her around. She hit the ground hard. Jake moved. He scooped up a burning piece of wood from the hay and threw it at Carl's mask. It struck home, and suddenly Carl was screaming. The leather mask had caught fire. Carl clawed at his face, trying to remove it, but the straps were buckled tight at the back of his head. Jake ran to Lucy, hooking his arms under hers and dragging her toward the back door of the barn. She fought him at first. "Let me go," she shouted. "I need to see him burn. You'll see nothing if you die from smoke inhalation," Jake shot back. He kicked open the back door and pulled her out into the cool night air. Behind them, the barn was a tower of flame lighting up the Montana sky. They collapsed on the grass 20 feet away, both coughing violently. Inside the barn, Carl's screams had stopped. "Is he dead?" Jake asked between coughs. Lucy pushed herself up on her elbows, staring at the inferno. "I don't know. I shot him twice before. I stabbed him in the throat once." He kept coming. "What is he?" "A man," Lucy said quietly. "Just a man, but the worst kind. The kind that decides other people are his to own, to hurt, to kill. The kind that builds a basement specifically for keeping women. I was number 7. Jake felt his stomach turn. 7? "I found their bones," Lucy said. "When I finally got out of that room, I found what was left of them." He kept trophies. Hair, jewelry, teeth. She touched her wounded face, gently. He liked to mark his property. "These cuts are fresh from tonight. He found me hiding here this morning and decided to remind me who I belonged to before he dragged me back." "How did you get away?" "Your cattle," Lucy said with a grim smile. "He was so focused on torturing me, he did not hear your bull charging until it was too late. Knocked him right through the barn wall. I ran while he was down." A crashing sound came from inside the burning barn. Part of the roof had collapsed. Jake watched the flames consume everything, hoping that whatever Carl was, he was trapped inside. "We need to get you to a hospital," he said. Lucy shook her head. "We need to make sure he's dead, really dead this time. You can barely stand." "I stood for 2 years in that basement," Lucy said, pulling herself to her feet. Her legs shook, but she stayed upright. "I can stand for this." Jake stood beside her. "Where's his house?" 5 miles north. "Old mining property at the base of Copper Ridge. That is where he kept me. That is where the others are buried." "We will get the sheriff," Jake said. "The sheriff is dead," Lucy replied flatly. "Carl killed him 2 months ago when he came asking questions about me. Made it look like a hunting accident." Jake stared at her. "How do you know that?" "Because Carl told me. He told me everything. He liked to brag about how smart he was, how he fooled everyone." She turned to look at Jake, her one good eye reflecting the firelight. "He told me about you, too." "Me? He said you were next. Said he needed a new barn to hunt from since his was getting too well known. Said your property was perfect, isolated, and that once he killed you, he could use your buildings for years." Jake's blood ran cold. "He was planning to kill me tonight?" "After he finished with me," Lucy said. "He wanted me to watch. Said it would be educational." The barn groaned behind them. More of the structure collapsed inward, sending sparks shooting into the night sky. Jake could smell gasoline in the air now. Carl must have stored fuel in there. Then they heard it. Movement inside the barn. Something heavy dragging across the floor. "No," Lucy whispered. A figure emerged from the flames. Carl, his clothes burning, his mask melted to his face, walked out of the inferno. Strips of his skin hung loose where the fire had eaten through. One arm dangled uselessly at his side. But his right hand still gripped the machete. He took one step toward them, then another. Lucy screamed, a sound of pure rage and despair. She picked up a rock and threw it at him. It bounced off his chest. He kept coming. Jake looked around desperately for a weapon. His rifle was gone, consumed by the fire. The pitchfork was inside. All he had was his bare hands. Carl raised the machete. His melted lips pulled back in what might have been a smile. Then the ground beneath Carl's feet exploded. The explosion threw Jake and Lucy backward. Dirt and debris rained down around them. When the dust cleared, there was a crater where Carl had been standing. Jake's mind raced to understand what had happened. Then he remembered the old mine shafts. His grandfather had warned him about them when Jake inherited the property. The land was riddled with unstable tunnels from the copper mining days. The barn's foundation must have weakened the ground just enough. Combined with Carl's weight and the heat from the fire, the earth had simply given way. Jake crawled to the edge of the crater and looked down. It was deep, maybe 30 feet. At the bottom, illuminated by the burning barn above, Carl lay twisted and broken. A wooden beam from the old mine shaft had impaled him through the chest. His machete was gone, lost in the darkness. But his head moved. His ruined face turned upward, and Jake heard a wet, rattling sound that might have been laughter. "He is still alive," Lucy said from beside him. She had crawled over too, despite her wounds. "He won't die. He can't. Everything dies," Jake said. But even as he spoke, he watched Carl's hand twitch, fingers clawing at the dirt around him. Lucy stood up shakily. "There is something I need to tell you about Carl." "Tell me later," Jake said. "We need to finish this and get you medical attention." "No, you need to know now." Lucy grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "Carl died once before." Jake looked at her. "What are you talking about?" 15 years ago, Carl Wagner was a miner. There was a collapse at the Copper Ridge mine. 17 men went down. Only Carl came back up. He was trapped for 6 days with no food, no water, in complete darkness. Lucy's eye was locked on the figure in the crater. When they found him, he was alive. But the other 16 men were not. And the way they found those bodies, what had been done to them. The investigators sealed the mine and never spoke of it publicly. "How do you know this?" "Because I researched him," Lucy said. "After I escaped his basement the first time 3 months ago, I got away for 2 whole days before he found me again. In those 2 days, I went to the library. I found old newspaper articles, death certificates, police reports that had been filed away and forgotten. Carl Wagner was pronounced dead 6 months after coming out of that mine. The official cause was a hunting accident. He was shot by his own brother during the dispute over their father's will. Jake felt the hairs on his neck stand up. But he is clearly not dead. His brother buried him in the family plot. There is a gravestone with his name on it. I saw it myself." Lucy's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Something came out of that mine wearing Carl Wagner's body, but it was not him anymore. His brother knew it. Fucking that is why he shot him. And when that did not work, when Carl got back up, his brother disappeared. Never found. In the crater below, Carl had managed to pull himself up slightly. The wooden beam shifted in his chest, but he did not seem to notice. His movements were slow but deliberate. He was trying to climb out. "We need to bury him," Lucy said. "Bury him deep where he can never get out." "The sheriff," Jake started. "The sheriff is dead, I told you. The deputy is 60 miles away visiting his sister. By the time anyone with authority gets here, Carl will be gone again. He always gets away. That is what he does." Jake looked at the burning barn, then at the crater, then at Lucy's destroyed face. He made a decision. "My tractor is in the shed," he said. "Can you make it there? What are you going to do?" "Exactly what you said. Bury him." Lucy smiled, the expression grotesque on her ruined face but genuine. "I will do better than make it to the shed. I will help." They moved as quickly as Lucy's condition allowed. Jake fired up the old Massey Ferguson tractor while Lucy found a chain in the equipment shed. Despite her injuries, she worked with focused determination, hooking the chain to the tractor's rear hitch. "There," she said, securing the last link. "Where are we dragging him?" Jake pointed to an area 50 yards from the crater. "Old septic tank. Been sealed for 20 years, but it is deep. 15 feet down, reinforced concrete walls. We put him in there and fill it with the dirt pile I have been meaning to move." He drove the tractor to the crater's edge. Carl was halfway up the wall now, using his one good arm to haul himself upward. The wooden beam had broken off, leaving a jagged stump protruding from his chest. His burned face turned toward them. "Lucy," he rasped, "you cannot kill me. I have tried to die. I want to die, but I cannot." "Then we will give you the next best thing," Lucy said. She threw the chain down into the crater. Eternity in the dark. Just like the mine. Jake did not wait to see if Carl would grab the chain. He put the tractor in gear and backed up. The chain went taut, and there was a satisfying scraping sound as Carl's body was yanked across the crater floor and dragged upward. "Keep going," Lucy shouted over the engine noise. Jake pulled Carl out of the crater and across the dirt. The thing that had been a man left a trail of blood and burned skin. Its fingers clawed at the ground trying to find purchase, but the tractor was too strong. They reached the sealed septic tank. Jake had covered it with a wooden platform and dirt years ago, but he knew exactly where it was. He stopped the tractor and jumped down. "The sledgehammer," Lucy said, already limping toward the tool shed. Together, they smashed through the old wooden cover. The smell that rose from below was ancient and foul. The concrete walls descended into darkness. It was perfect. Jake unwrapped the chain from Carl's body. The thing looked up at them with its melted face. "Please," it whispered, "please let me die." "You should have thought about that before you became a monster," Lucy said. She planted her foot on Carl's chest and pushed. Carl fell into the darkness. There was a wet thud 15 feet down, then silence. "The dirt," Jake said. They worked for over an hour. Jake used the tractor to push the massive dirt pile over the septic tank opening. Lucy helped as much as her broken body could manage, using a shovel to fill in gaps. By the time they finished, there was a mound of earth 8 feet high covering the tank. "It is not enough," Lucy said. "He will dig his way out eventually." Jake looked at the burning barn. It was nearly collapsed now, just a skeleton of burning timber. "I have an idea." He drove the tractor back to the barn and hooked chains to the largest remaining timbers. One by one, he dragged the burning wood to the mound and piled it on top. The flames caught the dry dirt and scattered hay, creating a bonfire over Carl's grave. "Fire and earth," Lucy said, watching the flames. "Maybe that will hold him." They stood there as the sun began to rise. Jake's barn was gone. His property was scarred with a crater and a burning mound, and beside him stood a woman who looked like she had fought a war and barely survived. "I should take you to a hospital now," he said gently. Lucy nodded slowly. "Yes, I suppose you should." "What will you tell them?" "The truth," she said. "Most of it, anyway. I will tell them I was held captive by Carl Wagner. I will tell them where to find his property and where the bodies are buried. I will tell them he died in a fire tonight. All of that is true. And the rest?" "The rest is ours to know," Lucy said. "Yours and mine. Nobody else would believe it anyway." Jake helped her into his truck. As they drove away, he looked in the rearview mirror. The burning mound was still visible, a beacon against the dawn sky. "Do you think he is really trapped?" he asked. Lucy was quiet for a long moment. "I think we gave ourselves a chance. That is more than I had yesterday." They drove in silence toward the nearest hospital, 40 miles away. The sun climbed higher, burning away the night. But Jake could not shake the feeling that somewhere beneath the earth and fire, something was still moving, still clawing, still trying to get free. The hospital staff reacted with controlled panic when Jake carried Lucy through the emergency room doors. Within seconds, nurses surrounded them, wheeling a gurney forward, shouting medical terms Jake did not understand. A doctor appeared, took one look at Lucy's face, and began barking orders. "What happened to her?" a nurse demanded, blocking Jake's path as they rushed Lucy away. "She was attacked," Jake said. "The man who did it is dead. We need to call the police." "Yes," Jake agreed. "You do." They made him wait in a sterile room with uncomfortable chairs and old magazines. A deputy sheriff arrived within the hour, a young man named Cole Patterson, who looked barely old enough to shave. He took Jake's statement with wide eyes, writing everything down in a small notebook. "So you are saying Carl Wagner is dead?" Cole asked. "Burned in my barn," Jake confirmed. "You will find his remains in the debris. And he held this woman, Lucy Chen, captive for 2 years?" Jake hesitated. Lucy's last name was Chen? He had not known that. "That is what she told me. We will need to investigate his property. Do you know where it is? Old mining property at Copper Ridge?" "North of my ranch, about 5 miles. Cole wrote furiously. "This is serious. We should contact the state police." "You should," Jake agreed. "But you should also be careful. Carl's property will have evidence of other victims. Lucy said she found remains." The deputy's face went pale. "How many?" 6 others, Jake said quietly. "At least." Cole stood up abruptly. "I need to make some calls. Do not leave town." Lucy was in surgery for 4 hours. The doctor who finally came to talk to him looked exhausted. "She will survive," he said, "but the damage is extensive. The facial wounds will require multiple reconstructive surgeries. She has 3 broken ribs, a fractured collarbone, and significant internal bruising." Whoever did this to her wanted her to suffer. Can I see her? Not yet. She needs rest. Come back tomorrow. Jake drove back to his ranch as the sun set. The burned remains of his barn looked worse in daylight. The crater from the mine shaft collapse was ringed with yellow caution tape that the fire department had placed. The mound covering the septic tank was still smoldering. He parked his truck and walked to the mound. The earth had settled slightly. He knelt down and pressed his hand against the dirt. It was warm, but not hot. The fire had burned itself out. Stay down there, he whispered. Stay dead. A sound behind him made Jake spin around. A woman stood at the edge of his property, watching him. She was elderly, maybe 70, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a long dress that looked decades out of style. You are Jake Henderson, she said. It was not a question. I am. Who are you, Margaret Wagner? Carl's mother. Jake's hand moved instinctively toward the pistol on his hip. Ma'am, I think you should leave. I am not here to cause trouble, Margaret said, raising her hands. I am here to help. I saw the smoke last night from my house. I knew it was time. Time for what? Time to tell someone the truth about my son. She walked closer, moving with surprising steadiness for her age. May we talk, Mr. Henderson? I promise you have nothing to fear from me. Jake studied her face. There was sadness there, and resignation, but no threat. But we talk out here in the open. Margaret nodded. She looked at the smoldering mound. Is he under there? What is left of him? Did he burn? Yes. Good, Margaret said softly. Fire is what he feared most. After the mine, Lucy told me about the mine collapse. Did she tell you what really happened down there? Jake shook his head. Margaret sat down on a tree stump, folding her hands in her lap. 17 men went into the Copper Ridge mine that day. Only Carl came out. The official story was that he survived on underground water and waited for rescue, but that was a lie. What is the truth? Carl ate them, Margaret said flatly. All 16 men. When they found him 6 days later, he was covered in blood and sitting in a pile of bones. The mining company paid off everyone involved to bury the story. They said the other men's bodies were lost in a secondary collapse. They gave the families compensation money and threatened anyone who talked. Jake felt sick. How do you know this? Because my husband, Carl's father, was one of the rescue team. He saw it. He came home that night and did not speak for 3 days. When he finally told me what he had seen, he was drunk. He made me swear never to tell anyone. Her voice cracked. He shot himself 2 weeks later. The guilt destroyed him. And Carl. Carl came home different. He looked the same, sounded the same, but something fundamental had changed. He stopped eating normal food. He started disappearing for days at a time. Then people started going missing. Hikers, drifters, anyone who wandered too close to Copper Ridge. Margaret looked up at Jake with tears in her eyes. My other son, Daniel, figured it out. He confronted Carl. They fought. Daniel shot Carl through the heart. Lucy told me about that. Daniel buried Carl in the family plot. We had a funeral. We mourned. We thought it was over. Margaret wiped her eyes. 3 days later, Carl came home. He was dirty from digging himself out of his grave, but he was walking and talking like nothing had happened. Daniel tried to shoot him again. The gun misfired. Carl killed Daniel that night, made it look like Daniel ran away. Then Carl came to me. What did he do? He thanked me for being his mother. He said he was sorry about Daniel, but that he could not control what he had become. He told me he would leave town and never come back. He gave me money and said I should forget I ever had a son named Carl. Margaret's voice dropped to a whisper. That was 42 years ago. I have been waiting ever since for someone to stop him. Jake processed this information. 42 years? Carl did not look older than 40. He stopped aging after the mine. Or maybe he ages differently now. I do not know how it works. I just know he is not human anymore. What is he then? Cursed, Margaret said. Damned. Punished by God or the devil or whatever lives in the deep places of the earth. The mine changed him into something that cannot die but cannot truly live. He needs to hurt people to feel anything at all, and the more he hurts them, the more he needs it. They sat in silence for a moment. The sun had fully set now, and stars were appearing overhead. Why are you telling me this? Jake asked. Because you need to know that what you did tonight, burying him and burning him, it might not be enough. Carl has survived worse. He will wait down there for years if he has to. Decades. He is patient because time means nothing to him anymore. Then what do I do? Margaret stood up. You watch. You wait. You keep this property and you never sell it. You make sure that mound stays intact. If it starts to sink or shift, you add more dirt. You burn it again if you need to. And when you get old, you find someone you trust and you tell them the truth. You make it their burden to carry. That is not fair, Jake said. Life is not fair, Mr. Henderson. My son ate 16 men alive and then spent 4 decades torturing and killing innocent people. Fair died a long time ago. Margaret started walking back toward the road. There's a box in my barn. It has every piece of evidence I collected over the years about Carl's victims. Photographs, newspaper clippings, police reports I stole. Tomorrow morning I will leave it on your porch. Give it to the police. Let those families have closure even if they cannot have justice. Wait, Jake called after her. What about you? What will you do? Margaret stopped and turned. I am going to do what I should have done 42 years ago. I am going to stop running from the truth. She walked away into the darkness, and Jake did not see her again. The next morning, a wooden box sat on his porch just as Margaret had promised. Inside were files documenting dozens of disappearances over 4 decades. Jake called Deputy Patterson immediately. The investigation that followed was massive. State police descended on Carl Wagner's property at Copper Ridge. They found the basement Lucy had described, along with evidence of at least 9 victims. They found graves scattered across the property containing the remains of 17 more people. The media came next. Reporters from across the country wanted to know about the monster of Copper Ridge. Jake refused all interviews. So did Lucy once she was released from the hospital 3 weeks later. They found Margaret Wagner's body in her home. She had taken sleeping pills, leaving a note that simply said, "I am sorry I was not stronger." The official story concluded that Carl Wagner was a serial killer who had operated for decades and died in a barn fire while attempting to recapture his escaped victim. The case was closed. But Jake knew better. Part 5. 6 months passed. Lucy's face healed as much as it ever would. The scars were permanent, thick ridges of tissue that crossed her features like a roadmap of suffering. The doctors had done their best, but some damage went too deep for surgery to fix. She came to visit Jake on a cold November morning. He was repairing a fence when her car pulled up the driveway. She stepped out wearing a heavy coat and a scarf, though the scarf did nothing to hide her scars. "Hello, Jake," she said. "Lucy, I did not expect to see you again." "I know, but I needed to come back." She looked toward the mound, which was now covered in grass and looked like a natural hill. "Is it quiet?" "Yes," Jake said. "Not a sound. Not a movement. I check every day." They walked together to the mound. Lucy placed her hand on the grass, closing her eyes. "I still have nightmares," she said. "Every night. I see him standing over me. I hear his voice. I feel the knife cutting my face." "Have you tried therapy?" 3 different therapists. They all say the same things. "Time will heal. You are safe now. He cannot hurt you anymore." Lucy opened her eyes. "But they are wrong. Time does not heal this. And I will never feel safe. Not while he is down there, still existing." "He's trapped," Jake said. 15 feet of dirt and concrete. "He cannot get out." "You do not know that." Margaret said he is patient. What if he is down there right now digging? What if it takes him 10 years or 20, but eventually he breaks through? Jake had thought about this many times. "Then I will be ready." Lucy turned to look at him. "That is why I came. I want to help you watch. I want to be here when he tries to come back." "Lucy, you do not have to do that. You are free now. You can go anywhere, start over somewhere far from here." "I tried," she said. "I went to California, rented an apartment by the beach, got a job at a bookstore. Tried to build a new life." She shook her head. "But every day I thought about him down there. Every night I wondered if today was the day he would break free. I could not eat, could not sleep, could not think about anything else." "So you came back?" "I came back because this is where I need to be. Running away did not give me peace. Maybe facing this will." Jake understood. "There is a cabin on the east edge of my property. It is small but sturdy. You can stay there if you want." "I want to earn my keep. I can work. I am stronger than I look." "Huh, I do not doubt that." Lucy moved into the cabin the next week. She proved to be a capable ranch hand despite her injuries. She could mend fences, feed livestock, and handle a rifle better than most men Jake knew. They developed a routine. They worked the ranch during the day and took turns watching the mound at night. Nothing happened. Months turned into a year. The mound remained still. No cracks appeared in the earth. No sounds came from below. Life settled into something almost normal. Then, one morning in late spring, Jake woke to find Lucy standing at his door. It was barely dawn. Her face was pale. "Something is wrong," she said. They walked to the mound together. At first, Jake saw nothing unusual. The grass was green and healthy. The earth was solid. Then Lucy pointed to the ground near the base of the mound. Look, there were cracks. Thin hairline fractures spreading out from the mound like spider webs. And the grass in a small circle had turned brown overnight. Jake knelt down and pressed his ear to the ground. For a moment he heard nothing. Then, faint but unmistakable, came a sound. Crouching. "He is digging," Lucy whispered. Jake stood up quickly. "How long do we have?" "I do not know. Days? Weeks? We need to reinforce it. More dirt, more weight, maybe concrete." They worked frantically. Jake called in favors from neighboring ranchers, claiming he needed to build up the land for drainage. They brought truckload after truckload of dirt, piling it on top of the mound until it was twice its original size. The scratching stopped for 3 days. Then it started again, louder than before. "It is not working," Lucy said as they stood watching the new cracks appear. "He is too strong. He is too determined." "Then we need a different solution," Jake said. He spent a week researching. He called experts on mine collapses, structural engineers, even a priest, though he was not a religious man. None of them could help with his real problem. How do you keep something buried that refuses to stay dead? The answer came from an unexpected source, an old book he found in Margaret Wagner's box of evidence. It was a journal written by one of the miners who had survived the original Copper Ridge collapse. Not Carl, but a man who had been rescued before the mine fully caved in. The entry Jake read was dated 2 days before the collapse. "Found something in the deep shaft today. Old bones, not human. Too big. Thompson said we should seal it up and forget about it. Said some things are meant to stay buried." Wagner laughed at him, said he wanted to see what was down there. "We will go deeper tomorrow." The next entry was the last. Wagner broke through the wall. There was a chamber behind it, empty except for more bones and strange markings on the walls. Wagner touched them, said they felt warm. That night he started acting different. Started talking about being hungry all the time. Thompson tried to warn the foreman. Next morning the mine collapsed. Jake closed the book. Carl had not become a monster because of what he did in the mine. He had become a monster because of what he found there. Something old, something that had been buried for a reason. He showed the journal to Lucy. She read it twice, her scarred face growing thoughtful. "So Carl was infected by something ancient," she said. "Something that makes him unable to die. And something that makes him need to hurt people," Jake added. "The hunger the miner mentioned. Carl feeds on suffering. Can we kill him if we destroy whatever infected him? I do not think so. I think it is part of him now. But maybe we can contain it differently. How? We need to go back to the source. We need to find that chamber in the mine and seal it properly. Maybe if we cut off the connection to whatever is down there, we can weaken him enough to keep him trapped." "The mine has been sealed for 42 years. It has probably collapsed. Then we find another way in. We dig if we have to." They spent 2 weeks preparing. Jake contacted a mining consultant who specialized in abandoned sites. The man was skeptical but curious enough to help. They used ground-penetrating radar to map the old mine tunnels and found that many were still intact, just buried under decades of cave-ins and debris. The consultant left Jake with maps and a warning. "If you go down there, you go at your own risk. Those tunnels are unstable. One wrong move and you will be part of the mountain forever." Jake and Lucy studied the maps every night. They identified what they thought was the chamber the journal had mentioned. It was deep, nearly 300 feet below the surface, accessible through a ventilation shaft that had been covered over but not fully collapsed. "We should tell someone," Lucy said. "Get professional help." "And tell them what?" "That we are looking for an ancient evil that infected a serial killer who cannot die. They would lock us up." "Then it is just us." "Just us," Jake agreed. They gathered supplies. Ropes, flashlights, climbing gear, tools for digging. Jake brought his rifle, though he knew it would be useless if they encountered Carl. Lucy brought gasoline and matches. "If we find it," she said, "we burn it. Whatever it is, fire might destroy it." They entered the mine at dawn on a Saturday. The ventilation shaft was overgrown with brush but still accessible once they cleared the debris. The opening was narrow, barely wide enough for Jake's shoulders. They descended on ropes, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The air grew cold as they went deeper. Jake could hear water dripping somewhere far below. The shaft walls were rough and unstable. Rocks occasionally broke free and fell into the darkness, taking long seconds before hitting bottom. They reached the main tunnel after 30 feet. It stretched in both directions, disappearing into blackness. According to the map, they needed to go left and then down through a collapsed section. They walked in silence, their footsteps echoing. Lucy stayed close behind Jake, her breathing steady despite the fear he knew she must be feeling. The collapsed section was worse than the map had indicated. It took them an hour to dig through enough debris to squeeze past. On the other side, they found themselves in a larger tunnel with rail tracks still visible on the floor. "We are close," Jake said, checking the map. "Another 100 feet and then down one more level." They found the stairs carved into the rock. They descended carefully, testing each step. At the bottom, they saw it. A hole in the wall, large enough to walk through. Beyond it, a chamber. Jake shined his flashlight inside. The chamber was roughly circular, about 20 feet across. The walls were covered in symbols he did not recognize, and in the center of the floor was a pile of bones. Not human bones. These were massive, each piece 3 or 4 times the size it should be. A rib cage big enough for a man to stand inside. A skull with eye sockets the size of dinner plates and teeth like daggers. "What is that?" Lucy whispered. "I do not know. Something old. Something that should have stayed buried." They stepped into the chamber. The symbols on the walls seemed to move in the flashlight beam, writhing and shifting. Jake felt dizzy looking at them. Lucy poured gasoline over the bones and the symbols. The smell was sharp in the confined space. "Wait," Jake said. "If we burn this, what happens to Carl? Maybe it kills him. Maybe it sets him free. Maybe nothing happens." Lucy struck a match. "But I would rather try than let him keep existing." She dropped the match. The chamber erupted in flames. The heat was immediate and intense. Jake and Lucy backed away, shielding their faces. The symbols on the walls began to glow, not from the fire, but with their own light, a sickly green that pulsed like a heartbeat. The bones in the center cracked and split, releasing smoke that smelled like rotting meat. Then they heard the scream. It came from everywhere at once, from the walls, from the floor, from the air itself. A sound of rage and pain and something else. Something like relief. The chamber shook. Rocks fell from the ceiling. The tunnel behind them groaned. "Run!" Jake shouted. They ran. Behind them, the mine was collapsing. The tunnel ceiling came down in sections, each collapse chasing them like a wave. They reached the stairs and climbed desperately, the entire structure shaking around them. A support beam fell, nearly crushing Lucy. Jake grabbed her arm and pulled her forward. They made it to the rail tunnel just as the stairs collapsed completely. But the collapse was spreading. They could see it advancing toward them, the ceiling falling piece by piece. They would never make it to the rope shaft in time. Jake saw a side tunnel. There. They dove into it as the main tunnel came down behind them. Dust and debris filled the air. They crawled forward blindly, coughing, unable to see. The tunnel narrowed. Jake thought they were trapped. Then he felt air moving. Fresh air. They crawled toward it and found themselves in another ventilation shaft, this one angled upward. They climbed desperately, their hands bloody, their lungs burning. They emerged into daylight on the far side of Copper Ridge, nearly a mile from where they had entered. They collapsed on the ground, gasping and coughing. When Jake could finally speak, he said, "Did it work?" Lucy sat up and looked back toward Jake's ranch. They could see the smoke from the mine collapse rising in the distance, and beyond it, the mound covering the septic tank. As they watched, the mound collapsed. The earth caved in on itself, creating a depression where the hill had been. "It worked," Lucy said. "Whatever was down there, it is gone now, and Carl is gone with it." They walked back to the ranch. It took them 3 hours. By the time they arrived, the sun was setting. The collapsed mound was now just a crater, the septic tank visible at the bottom, empty. Jake climbed down and examined it. There were scratch marks on the concrete walls, deep gouges where Carl had clawed at his prison, but he was gone. No body. No bones. Nothing. "Where is he?" Lucy asked from above. "I do not know. They searched for a week." They found no trace of Carl Wagner. No tracks, no blood, No evidence he had ever been there. The local authorities investigated the mound's collapse and declared it a sinkhole caused by the old septic tank failing. They filled it in with concrete and moved on. Jake and Lucy remained on the ranch. They kept watching. They kept waiting. But Carl never came back. Years passed. Jake and Lucy grew old together, though they never married. They were partners in vigilance, bound by shared trauma and shared purpose. On Jake's 70th birthday, Lucy found him sitting on the porch, looking toward where the mound had been. "Do you think he is really gone?" she asked. "I think whatever he was connected to is gone," Jake said. "The thing in the mine. Maybe without that he could finally die. Or maybe he is out there somewhere, starting over. Maybe. But he is not our problem anymore." Lucy sat beside him. Her scars had faded to white lines, but they were still there. They would always be there. "I used to hate these scars," she said. "I used to wish I could make them disappear. And now? Now I think they are proof. Proof that I survived. Proof that I fought back. Proof that monsters can be stopped, even if they cannot be killed." She looked at Jake. "Thank you for not looking away that night. Thank you for seeing me even when I begged you not to." Jake took her hand. "Thank you for staying. For not running, even though you had every right to." They sat together as the sun set over the Montana mountains, two survivors watching over a ranch that had seen horrors but had endured. The land was quiet now, peaceful. And deep beneath the earth, in a collapsed mine that would never be opened again, the bones of something ancient had finally turned to dust, taking their curse with them into oblivion. The nightmare was over.